Welcome to the Empower LEP podcast. I'm your host, Jana Parker. I'm a licensed educational psychologist, a group practice owner, and the owner and mentor at Empower LEP. Today, I had the pleasure of hosting Dr. Jaclyn Fleck. She is from Chicago. She is awesome, super fun. She's a clinical psychologist, and she's the co-owner of a neuropsych testing practice in Chicago. She works alongside her husband, so that's pretty cool. But what I brought her onto the show to talk about was she's a consultant for other clinicians regarding insurance billing and Superbills. So I've hired her for her services, and she really helped me just understand how to set up my Superbill in a way that was going to be most advantageous, like be truthful, obviously, for the work that I'm doing, but also advantageous for clients so that they can hopefully get as much reimbursement for services as possible. So I thought that she would be interesting to bring to this audience. And in fact, she was quite interesting to talk to. So listen in. I hope that you enjoy this conversation with Dr. Jaclyn Fleck as much as I did. Welcome to the Empower LEP podcast, Dr. Jaclyn Fleck.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here today.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you on here. I was really eager to get connected with you, and I have already been a user of your services. So I'm excited to share you with this audience because I think that what you have to offer could be very helpful.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I hope that other educational psychologists will really appreciate hearing more about what I do, and I guess just being more thoughtful about the ways that we're testing and the Superbills that psychologists are creating, so that we can, I guess, support our clients as much as possible. You know, it's a lot of money to spend on an assessment, so it's a big sell if you can have a really nice Superbill to increase the chances of actually getting reimbursed for part of what you've paid.
Yes. Absolutely. And I have adjusted what I've been doing, and I'm I'm like kind of waiting on seeing what has happened with those. You know what I mean? Like I'm in
Yeah.
that process of like, I wonder if this worked. So it's an
And
exciting time.
it's so much trial and error too, because of all the different insurances. And we can talk about that later, but I wish that there were just one rule across all companies, but I think that would be too easy. And so they have to keep us on our toes of like, what are the rules? And we're all going to make them different. We, meaning the different insurance companies. So sometimes, yeah, with Superbills, it is trial and error and getting feedback from your clients and being willing to edit a Superbill and adjust it just to be flexible so that they can get as highest likelihood of reimbursement as possible.
Right, right. Well, let's kind of start at the beginning. Tell us about kind of who you are, what you do full time, and then how you ventured into this other entrepreneurial role as a consultant for other psychologists.
So I'm a clinical psychologist, and I have been a clinical psych for 10 years, I think. Yeah, I graduated in 2015. And I am in a suburb of Chicago called Naperville. And I think it kind of is a good reference. It is a fairly affluent area. So we do also have clients who are self-pay and request super bills. Um, but my background is in traumatic stress. That's what my specialty was in school. Came out doing therapy, and then I am married to a clinical psychologist as well. So he was on postdoc and doing a testing only postdoc. And I remember his wait list was so long that by the time he got to like who was up next, we'll say, they weren't on the wait list anymore. Like they had already had testing somewhere else because his wait list was just extraordinarily long. And I am really business minded. I'm like the type A, like, let's do it kind of person. And so I said, well, why we should just open a testing practice. And this is literally as simple as it was, that I thought like, there's clearly a demand for it. And we both have this training, let's do it. And so I stopped providing therapy pretty soon after we opened that practice. And so our testing only practice is called Prosper Psychological Services, and it's located in Naperville. And we've had that for 7 or 8 years. I forget, honestly. And Yeah, we meet with clients ages 4 and older, all the way through adulthood. And the primary referrals are ADHD, autism, and learning disorders.
Mhm.
We certainly do meet clients that are more focused on what I would say is psychological testing. So things like personality disorders, mood disorders, and whatnot, trauma as well. But the bulk of it are more neuro focused
Yeah.
assessments. Um, Love it. And I would say it's about 60-40 as far as kids versus adults that we see. So we see a lot of different clients. And so we've been doing that testing. And then in 2023, I received a certified letter in the mail. And it was from Blue Cross, which you can imagine just like literally receiving that is like, there's nothing good that's going to come from a certified letter from Blue Cross. Like they're not sending me a letter to say like, we just want to let you know you're doing great and like
Yeah.
keep up with the work.
Can I ask you a question before you
Of course.
were you taking insurance for assessment or not?
Good question. So yes, at that point, and when we started 7 or 8 years ago, we were on 5 panels,
Okay.
Blue Cross, Optum, which is United, Aetna, Cigna, and Beacon. I don't know how popular those are all the way over by you.
A
But
few of them.
yeah. So now in 2025, we are only on Blue Cross and Optum's panels. So we've dropped the other ones. So yes, I was paneled. And at that point, really, we didn't have a lot of self-pay referrals. We were fairly new, so we were sticking to insurance. Okay, so I received this letter, and long story short, it says you're being audited, and that they had chosen 5 clients for me that they were basically I needed to defend why did I bill the way that I billed. And the summary is that I didn't pass the audit. And I came to find out that it is when you get a letter like this from Blue Cross, they've already determined that you've broken whatever their rules are. And so it's not like you pass the audit, right? It's kind of like a kid who gets in trouble and you're like, why did you do da da da? And it's like, I mean, there's very little they can say to actually for a parent to back off and be like, oh, that's a reasonable explanation. Blue Cross is like, you're already kind of, it's not going to go well for you. So I didn't pass the audit. And I was in this probationary program basically for 6 months where I needed to get pre-auth on every single one of my testing cases.
So that's what they do that's what happens if you don't pass an audit?
Yeah. And I mean, I can't speak to all 50 states and what, all different insurances, but that was my experience. And I've had a lot of psychologists reach out to me since I have spoken about this, saying that they had the same experience. So I think it's pretty typical.
Okay.
So yeah, then you basically need to defend during that probationary period, the 6 months, every case, why you're even testing them, every assessment that you're using, obviously the amount of hours, and then you wait a few days to hear back if they're okay with you testing that person and if they approve those hours. And I came to find out through the audit that what I was doing wrong, I had literally never received feedback about. And the cases that were wrong to them were cases from 3 and 4 years previous. Yeah, I love your face. So this is typical though, that unless your claim is getting denied, you really don't, as a psychologist, as really any provider who's billing insurance, at least mental health, we don't really get feedback on, is this claim even correct? It's just like, it's denied. And maybe sometimes there will be an explanation. And I find often that we're like, what does this explanation even mean?
Right.
Like, what are these? It's like just random words put together in a sentence. But still, can't comprehend it. And so they're like, yeah, remember 4 years ago when you were billing this way, it was all wrong. And I remember saying like, I have never received feedback about this. I genuinely, it was like, I didn't know. And they're like, well, now you do. And I was like, well, yes, that is true that I do know, but now I'm in this purgatory for 6 months. And I'm one of the lucky ones that they did not claw back any money from me, but that is I don't know how common, I can't speak to like a percentage, but many clinicians have told me that they have had to pay back money, during their audits. So it's not good. So that experience, this is like circling back to your question, I promise, that from that, I started talking about it more with clinicians and realizing that this has happened to a lot of other clinicians that they've been audited. But that even more than that, people were like coming out of the woods saying to me like, well, I don't know how to bill for insurance. And it became this thing, I think, that other clinicians realized like, oh, none of us know what we're actually doing. We're just flying by the seat of our pants. And usually what we're doing when we're billing either insurance or creating super bills is because someone else told me I should do this. I heard on Facebook I should do this. I think I saw somewhere, da da da. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is not good.
Well,
And
the insurance companies put you on panels, but then they don't teach you what it is that they need from you. You're just supposed to know.
you are supposed to magically know what to do. So yes, when you're paneled, which I know a lot of your listeners aren't on insurance panels, but you receive a contract that basically says like, here's all the stuff you can't do, and it has nothing really to do with, it has very little to do with billing. But then you do get a fee schedule, which has every CPT code on it, and then how much they're going to pay you for, so you know what you're going to make. But nowhere does it say, here's the limit to the amount of units you can bill, or here's when to build this thing. So there's this big gap in our education. I think for the vast majority of providers, psychologists, and even, maybe master's level therapists, for instance, where we learn the mental health side of everything, but then the business is like, best of luck.
Right.
I mean, most psychologists I know from when I was in graduate school own their own practice now. We did not have one class about running a business.
Nor us.
Which is like the norm, I know, but then it becomes, so what happens is we as psychologists build our confidence based off of, my friend told me this, I saw this, and it ends up being a lot of falsehoods.
Right. And it's almost like you don't realize that it could be a really big deal until you are audited, right?
Yes. Yeah, I have chills with you saying that. Yes, because there are a lot of providers that find out that they owe a lot of money. I spoke with someone this week who part of his business plan is buying other practices who are not doing well. And the vast majority of them are because they were audited. And those practices are medium sized. And most of them owe over $100,000.
Wow.
And you think, can you imagine like when insurance or even a self-pay client pays me? I mean, I'm not sitting here on $500,000 right now in my own personal life. I'm using that.
Yeah.
So for so many practices, it's devastating to be audited where they can't come back from that. And you think, but this is information where I was never told in the first place not to do it. And it's nothing egregious, right? We're not like, oh, I wasn't told that I can't see my husband and do his own assessment, right? Like things where you're like, duh. But where it's like, oh, I didn't realize that the base code for testing 96136, that I'm not actually supposed to use that more than once per client. Which we can talk about later, because I'm sure some of your listeners, even hearing that, are going to be like, stop, what? Not good news. So as I spoke more and more about this with other clinicians, I realized I don't think many people know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then when I dug more into it, when I was audited, I remember one of the first things Blue Cross said to me was that, well, this information is available to you on the internet. This meaning rules about testing. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I've never seen that. And then they sent me a link to a PDF that did indeed outline a lot of what I consult with other clinicians about. So it became something where it was like, okay, so you've put this on the internet, but it's not like the internet is that there's only 12 things on the internet total, right? It was like, you would have to be thinking one day, I should Google the terms Blue Cross Blue Shield, neuropsych testing, rules for submitting claims. And maybe then the PDF would come up. So it became this thing where I think maybe and now this is a guess, but it kind of seems like to cover their own butts, they're able to say, well, we did provide this information to you. We put it on the internet and you just didn't find it, which is obviously wild. So I started sharing with colleagues. I actually have a lot of good information now, and now I have facts to support how you should bill. I was, of course, it was terrible that 6 months of being on probation, but I worked one-on-one with a Blue Cross provider every day who told me all of this information. So it ended up being like, well, finally, at least someone who's in charge is just telling me this is exactly how you need to bill things to get paid and to not get audited.
Yeah.
So now it ended up being a kind of lemons into lemonade situation.
Yep.
And I thought, well, I'll just start telling clinicians that I'm doing this little consultation side gig. I've got a lot of student loans and like, let's just see what happens. I can pay some of them off. Um, and then it snowballed into many people telling me, I need to talk to you because I have no idea what I'm doing, or I think I know what I'm doing, but now I have a lot of anxiety thinking maybe I don't know what I'm doing. And then just recently, a few days ago, I did a national talk for PAR. A lot of us know them for a lot of the assessments that we buy off of their site
Yeah.
and their trainings as well. And had, almost 1,000 attendees and close to that many questions, which I think what people told me after, because I received many emails, was a lot of validation that you had that many questions, which means that none of us know what we're doing.
Right.
So that's how I got to where I am today, sitting and talking to you, is this whole arc,
Yep.
my life story here.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry that you went through that, but I am also happy that someone can give us some guidance
Yeah.
in the field, right? I mean, you are making lemonade, and that's how a lot of things happen. I mean, people,
Yeah.
I say this all the time because I, guide people through starting their businesses,
Mm.
and it's like you kind of go like, oh, I'm going to start a business, like, oh, it couldn't be too hard. But then you're like, oh,
Everyone's
I don't
doing it.
actually know anything about this. And then you you kind of know like, I probably shouldn't do that, but who's going to know?
No
Who's going to
one's
find
gonna
out?
find
No
out.
one's going to find out. Then
Mhm.
you know what? Someone finds out,
And
you
you're like,
know?
"Shoot,
Yeah.
what do I do?"
So I really try to give the best guidance I can give is like, just set yourself up legitimately, right? In every way that you can.
Yes.
And if you think like, I don't know if this is super legit, or I don't really know about this, but I'm going to try to know, like, reach out for support and help and guidance on it to make sure that you have enough um to 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 feel like you are gonna do it right, because you could
Yeah.
get sued. The second you have a business, you are opening up yourself up for everything from
Right?
insurance audits to being sued by clients to being sued for something on your website by somebody that you don't even know. Like,
Gosh.
apparently I just found out yesterday through something on social media that our Word documents are being scraped by AI.
Oh my goodness.
Right? And I'm like, "What?" Like,
That's not good.
that's not good, right? You have
Yeah.
to turn something off in your Word, which I haven't done yet, but I just saw this, right? Like, so if someone was like, then their PHI and HIPAA and all the things. So,
Sure.
I'm
Yeah, I think there's a lot of anxiety to running our own businesses, our own testing, mental health businesses. And then, but you're right. Eventually you get into it and the anxiety settles. It kind of is like always there, but you're like, I'm fine. Like everything's good. We're fine. I haven't been sued. My client, I have pretty good reviews. Like we're okay. And then, but then when you hear like what you just mentioned about the Word document, or you see me post about testing codes, then your anxiety's like,
right.
hello, old friend, you are you actually doing things the right way?
Yeah.
So I want to help clinicians feel confident. Like this is at least a part of my business that I can control and I know I'm doing it the correct way. Um, and I don't want anyone to hear this as me being like a cheerleader for insurance. I am not. In fact, I'm like very like down with the system. Um, but I'm also very aware that many people need to play the game. right? We need to create super bills that follow the rules of this bigger entity in order to serve our clients.
Mhm.
Or some of us take insurance so that our clients can access care. And no one likes it. No one's like, oh my gosh, I love being on an insurance panel and getting paid, a third of what I could actually get paid. But right, there's reasons for it. And so my goal is to help clinicians feel like confident, in control, and learn how to play the game with billing in a way that feels good to them and not unethical, but also doesn't leave any money on the table, honestly.
Yep. Yep. For either person, like what you as
Yeah,
and also for your clients.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, okay, so let me ask you just so you help, one of the things that you do is help people actually who do take insurance.
Right.
Do you help them actually get paneled, or do you just help them once they are to make sure
Yeah.
that what they're doing is
Right. I do have quite a few clinicians I've consulted with who are even thinking about getting paneled, which is interesting, where they're self-pay now and they actually want to move to taking insurance. And so we talk a lot about the pros and cons. And spoiler alert, most of them end up not getting paneled after talking to me because I'm like, basically like, why would you do that? That doesn't really make a lot of sense.
yeah.
So no, I don't help anyone get paneled. I don't really even want to be a part of that process. That just feels like I'm like sending them down a road that's not actually going to be great for them.
Yeah.
So it's all about, once you're already paneled, how do you what should my claims look like? And because right, I think any of us could do a 10-hour assessment with a client. And when I say 10 hours, I mean test you in person for 10 hours. Then I'm going to take another 8 to write your report. I'm going to do a 2-hour feedback with you. And some people that are listening might be like, that's me.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, insurance does not want you to do that. In fact, those secret PDFs that I referred to before that I was telling you about, they actually explicitly say that commercial insurances, so private ones like Blue Cross and Optum, for instance, that they expect an ADHD assessment, an uncomplicated ADHD assessment, to take 3 to 4 hours total outside of the intake. That means your testing of the client and your report writing, 3 to 4 hours. And that a comprehensive assessment. So that's right where that doesn't include academic testing, but this would just be, okay, well, is it ADHD? Is it anxiety? I'm also going to assess for autism here. That other than the intake from start to finish, that should take 8 hours of your time. And I don't believe that anyone hearing those numbers is like, yeah, I'm solidly within that. It's like, I'm like solidly way outside of what
Yeah.
they're saying.
Yeah.
And hearing those numbers, I think for a lot of clinicians is the first time that they've heard that. So it just goes to support that, like, that information is out there of this is what we expect you to stay within. But most people have no idea.
Yeah. I mean, and so as educational psychologists, we are typically not looking to be on insurance panels. We're
You
not
have to get reimbursed for the educational testing portion.
right. And exactly. Like, so, and
Who cares?
all our assessments are, and our scope is educationally related, right? Which usually means psychoeducational assessment, or it could mean like we're doing we're always looking at the academic impact, but it could maybe not be quite as long, right? Just depending on the circumstances, but they're
Right.
always educationally related. And so, I mean, we're always doing achievement. Well, I won't speak for everybody, but I'll speak for us.
But
We're
it would make
achievement
sense that
testing.
you have achievement testing in
Right,
there.
right,
Absolutely.
right.
So you're already thinking, for maybe me personally, I'm giving, we'll say a Wyatt to a elementary aged kid. I'm like 2 or 3 hours into this assessment.
Yeah.
That's like half of my allotted time for everything already. So yeah, it's pretty wild. And I think something that is really good to know, well, that's interesting to know, that kind of supports the chaos of all of this, is that most clinicians will get reimbursed, especially our insurance paneled clinicians. They'll get reimbursed if they bill for more than those units that I just told you about, those hours. But what happens is they get flagged over time in insurance systems that, okay, Dr. Fleck is consistently billing too many hours, but we're going to still pay her, right? Which I experience as positive reinforcement. Like, clearly this is fine because you're giving me money for this.
Yeah.
But then what happens for a lot of clinicians is years later, then they find out you weren't supposed to bill that many hours. Because remember, it was online in the abyss of the internet. And it's your fault that you didn't find that. And yeah, we did pay you and we never denied any of these claims, but like you should have known, like, and so now here we are.
Right. Right.
So yeah, and of course with Superbills, I mean, I want to talk more about that too, so that because I think it's important for educational psychologists then to think about, well, how do you kind of make sense of what you are doing as a clinician versus like what you're actually putting on the Superbill, or at least having a really frank conversation with your clients and families about what they're paying you versus what realistically might be reimbursed.
Yeah. And that's kind of where most of us are, is in this like, okay, we're going to be in the habit of providing Superbills.
Yep.
And maybe you could give us, I know you probably gets like more intricate if you do consultation with you. I
Absolutely.
know that because I've done it.
Better information.
But give us some general, general things that you can say to us about Superbills and the kinds of things that we want to be thinking about and kinds of things that we need to know, and why it might be beneficial to actually have some consultation on this.
Yeah, well, I think to start with your last question is that with clinicians who are self-pay, which is probably half of the people that I speak with, so I mean a big portion, we usually actually look at your Superbills. So when you consult with me, I will actually look at your paperwork and see what you're doing, that you'll be able to send to me some examples so that we can see over time, like, what are you actually billing? Because I want to have eyes on what codes are you using? Are they appropriate? What are the units? And I find that probably one of the biggest, I can't think of a better word than error, even though you don't know it's an error, is many self-pay clinicians are testing over several days. Yeah. And I would assume educational psychologists definitely are. You're not like, let's do this Whisk and Wyatt today, baby. So you're splitting it up, but that actually insurance wants us to have everything on the same date of service, which seems bonkers. Like, why when, like, I really did do 3 days of testing. That's the truth. So why am I putting on a Superbill that I only did 1 day of testing? So yes, I get into the nitty gritty with clinicians when I do consultations so that we can figure out what works for their practice and even for their record purposes as well. But when we're thinking about, okay, so our Superbill, what does this actually look like? Just to start so basic, we want to make sure that your Superbill has all the important information on it, like your name, your license number, the name of your practice, all this stuff. Your Superbill should also have your signature on it. So we're thinking just at the most basic level. An insurance company needs to establish that you, Dr. Fleck, for instance, that I am who I say I am. So this client did pay me and I am in fact a licensed clinical psychologist. So that information should be on there so that it's really easy for insurance to verify, like, yep, okay, she's legit and not just some weirdo in an alley who did your psych testing for your kid. So then, I think one thing, and I talked about this in my PAR presentation last week. So it's definitely a gem that I think a lot of us don't know about, is that clinicians should be using, using 90791. That's our intake code, twice. This is an easy way for families to get a little bit more money back. For most insurance companies, the range of what 90791, which is a clinical interview, diagnostic interview, the range of reimbursement, at least here in Illinois in the Chicagoland area, is between $150 and like $225 just for one unit. So this is a really high paying CPT code compared to most. And most of us, especially when we're seeing kiddos, we are doing a clinical interview with the family, and then we are doing some kind of interview with the kiddo a different day. Now we're thinking, okay, what qualifies as a clinical interview? So you're thinking, am I talking to the kid about who's your best friend? What do you do at recess? What's really tricky for you about school? This is gathering information about your client that I think a lot of us are like, we maybe don't account for that time where it just seems like we're chatting and building rapport, and we are, but it's also like good to capture that on a super bill. So to really make it so specific, on a super bill, you could have 2 units of 90791, but they do need to be separated onto 2 different dates of service. So your super bill might look like January 29th, 90791, 1 unit. And then let's say you start testing the kid on, I don't know, we'll say the next day they come in. So then you would put 90791, 1 unit for January 30th. And we want to make sure those are separated or else they're not going to get paid out. And many clinicians too, I find are like, well, I'm doing a 2-hour intake with parents. And unfortunately, 90791, even though it is sort of a time-based code, once you get over a certain amount, insurance is like, you could do a 4-hour intake and you can still only bill 1 unit. Like you can't be like, it was 4 hours and so I'm going to bill 4 units.
Yeah.
So for those listening who have very lengthy intakes, it can really behoove you to maybe split it into a different day so that you can capture some of that extra time and money. Even though you're charging self-pay for it, you can capture that time and money for your client back by splitting the intake into 2 different days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense so far?
Yes. Makes sense to me. Yes.
Love it.
Yes.
And then, for as far as like, okay, what do I actually need to put on a claim? I think that the examples are so varied that I don't think I can talk to you about it, not because I'm trying to be secretive at all, but I think that it really, and I hope from personal experience, it's really like, we need to look at your super bill to see what you're doing now. But one thing that I do know, and that's a big problem, and this was a piece of why I was flagged and I was audited, is because I was using base codes more than once. So let's start like so far back with, what is a base code? Because I don't want anyone to be like, oh yeah, base codes, Jaclyn. Okay. And they're like, I don't know what that actually means.
No.
That's not good. We've got to start at the beginning. So, a base code, we know, like when we do testing, we're using the codes 96136 and 96137. Those are our common CPT codes for testing. 96136 is the base code. That's the code that has to come first before anything else. Just like, let's say you're using the neuropsych testing codes, 96132 and 96133. 96132 is the base code. It's the one that has to come first. So in those secret, mysterious PDFs that are online, they actually explicitly state, and I was like, oh, son of a bee, like to only use the base codes once per time with client. So that means the whole time I'm testing you, even though you're thinking, well, but if I met with this client over 3 days of testing, then I should be putting 96136 3 different times.
Right.
Because I met with them that many times and the base code has to be on there. And what insurance is saying is, you just need to add it all up at the end. So let's say you did meet with them 3 times and it was 2 hours each time. Then on the last date of service, so on day 3, you're going to bill 6 hours of testing. Do you see how I got 2, 2, and 2?
Are you saying that base code, you do 6 units of the base?
So you would do, let's do the, the math here. So let's say you had the 3 days of testing and we tested this kiddo for 2 hours on each day. So it's a total of 6 hours of testing, which, just to mess with us even more, remember that these units for testing are actually 30 minutes.
Right.
So like, it's not actually even 6 units, right? It's 12 units is what we're working with here. So we have 12 units, and I literally have a pen and paper out right now, just so we can make sure our math is mathin'. So what we would do on that last date of service is we would do 96136, 1 unit, 96137, 11 units.
Right.
And that's how that would make sense, even though it like doesn't actually make sense to any of us, but to insurance and how they process it, they're like, great, we love this. And we're thinking again that a lot of getting paid, whether you're a clinician who is paneled or you're a clinician who is self-pay, is that you do have to play the game. And I bet many clinicians who are self-pay probably thought, I never want to deal with insurance, and so I'm just not going to take it. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm still dealing with insurance somehow.
Yeah.
Like you should be immune to any of these rules, because who cares? You're self-pay, but still, if we're thinking that we want to try and get our clients reimbursed, then it is important to play some of these games here.
I have like a letter right here from United Healthcare saying, we're following up on a claim for so-and-so. During our review, we noticed that the claim is for the patient's 30th visit, which is nearing the plan's maximum of 30 visits. So then they're saying, if he's going to need treatment beyond the maximum, this is for speech therapy.
Okay.
If he's going to need treatment, you must receive prior authorization for additional visits. But this is to us. Why are they telling us this? The parent gives them a super bill. We do not deal with this. Why am I getting this letter?
So I love it. First off, I love it. And I would love if you just sent that right back to them. Like, no, thank you. Return to sender. No, thank you. I don't know why I have this.
To get his speech therapy, right? Like, but why are they sending me this? Why?
So what's likely happening though, so United is definitely notorious for lots of pre-auth stuff. In fact, if you don't use the neuropsych testing codes, so again, that's 96132 and 96133. If you are a clinician who uses the psych testing codes, 96130 and 96131, those do actually need pre-authorization to be approved. And that's really good for our self-pay friends to know, because they are going to give a super bill to their clients with 96130 and 96131 on it. And United will say, well, you never got pre-auth for these, so we're not paying for any of this. So I think that, and United is clearly saying, you clinician, even though you're out of network and you don't want to even speak with us, if your client wants to try and submit these super bills in the future, we're going to say no, because they don't have pre-auth, which then kind of ropes you into this conundrum. And what happens is some self-pay clinicians do choose to do pre-authorizations for their clients. They will go ahead and request that just so that their self-pay clients can still get approved. But many will be like, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. And so then what ends up happening, especially for our United friends, is that we have to tell the families, I mean, here's your super bill, but you're likely not going to be reimbursed for anything because I didn't get pre-auth, which is kind of makes you the bad guy, right? It's like, how dare you not do this? And you're like, I have no relationship with this insurance company. Like, why should I do this?
Well, I have an admin now, so maybe I'll have her do it.
Well, look you're so fancy. You're looking at the admin of my business. So I do have to do it still because I'm paneled with insurance, but luckily our testing is like almost always neuropsych. So it's so rare. But like even now with me being paneled with insurance, I will check online someone's benefits because it takes me maybe 4 minutes total to like log in and actually do it. But if the benefits aren't on there, I don't check them anymore. I don't call, because I can't recoup 45 minutes of listening to Blue Cross and Blue Shield's on hold music, or them hanging up on me, or who knows what drama.
Yeah.
The amount of rage that I've had being on hold is just, it's enough to like fuel a country.
And I've done it before, like trying to get pre-author, like, if they're like, oh, my insurance company says they'll pay for our testing, but we have to get a pre-authorization. And I'm always like, oh, all right, we'll try, and then I'm like, why did I even do that? Why did I even do that? It's the worst.
Because you want it to be different this time. And you're hoping that like this time it'll work. And then afterwards you're like, it didn't. Again, the data continues to show that like, it's not worth my time to do this. And it becomes this crazy drama.
Right.
So, I mean, I think this is too really important. You talk about how you help clinicians set up their business, and I'm helping clinicians with the billing side. And I think how this comes together to have a really strong business is being transparent with our clients about, what is likely going to happen in this process, so that they're not getting into it thinking, okay, I'm paying you, and I'm telling you Chicago crisis, I'm paying you $5,000 for this psychoeducational assessment. And you've told me about a super bill, and I kind of heard from that I would get $5,000 back from Blue Cross, right? That it's so important that we do make sure clients understand and that we have it in writing. And maybe we even have a form that they have to sign that says, I get it. You are not in network. I'm not going to come back and try and ask for this money back, or I'm not going to try and have you get in network, or whatever we need to do to cover our butts. But that it's really important that we are just transparent about the whole thing, so that, I don't know, right? It's the worst thing is to have a mad client when you're thinking about your business. I
Right.
see people post all the time about how we're afraid of bad reviews, which is fair.
Yeah.
And often people post bad reviews because they just had to pay what they knew they had to pay, but they're just pissed about it.
Right. Right.
Like, yeah, Dr. Fleck told me I had to pay $5,000, but I'm like really pissed that I did still have to pay 5,000. And so 1 star, wish it was cheaper, even though I knew it was going to be that price.
Oh my God.
So yeah, so I got on this whole subject because I was saying that when you're billing base codes, we really want to make sure on a super bill that the base code is only listed one time. So 96136 is only listed one time. That's going to increase the chances that your client actually gets reimbursed for it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, something important to know that I think maybe does happen with clinicians is that typically insurance is only reimbursing testing once per calendar year. We want to keep that in mind for those of us that do reassessments, or clients who want a second opinion. And you're still providing them a super bill, just again, to be really clear that here's your super bill, but you just met with Dr. So-and-so. And so there's a very good chance that none of this will be covered still.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I ask you, do you use Simple Practice?
No, I use Office Ally, but I rolled my eyes at you because every person who has asked me what system I use does use Simple Practice.
Huh.
And so it's very popular. And I have found from everyone telling me who uses Simple Practice that they're not sure how to reconcile how the billing should be with how Simple Practice works. That is something about like that you guys need to like make a note in the system every time you meet with a client. But then if you're not actually sending a claim for that day, then it's like, how do I even show that the client was actually here that day? Something like this is what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, well, I can probably speak to that a little bit. So, well, the way that we do it is, if a client, every time a client is coming in for testing, we have that appointment on the calendar. But sometimes we're not billing anything on those days.
Yeah, right.
And so when you go to make a super bill, you can actually uncheck those days from the super bill.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, now you've taught me that, so I can tell other people to just uncheck it. And this
If
is
it
just
says zero. Yeah. If it says
Yeah.
$0, you can uncheck it. Yeah.
Great. So then that might be the fix for a lot of clinicians. That's pretty simple.
Yeah. That's what we've been doing since I met with you.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's worked fine on the super bills.
Yeah. Well, what we've been doing is actually, this is what we've been doing. We've been doing like the 90791 on the intake.
Yep.
Then we've been doing on the first day of testing, we do all of the rest of the codes that we do. And on the last day of testing, we do the feedback session code.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I mean,
and then we have a feedback session, but we bill $0.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's trial and error.
I don't know if it works, but that's what we're doing. That's how we're doing. Because we have to also charge the client. And I think that was one of the problems, like, because we want to be able to, we charge the client on the second day of testing for like everything, we do a deposit, then we charge the client second day of testing for everything, but that we're still working on the case. And I know that there are a lot of people who are like, well, I want to show all of the days that we worked on this, but a lot of it is report writing. So
right. I mean, it's true, right? That if a client's looking at their super bill and it truly reflects what the clinician did, the client's going to be like, well, we weren't in your office on Sunday. Like, what is this? Right. And you're like, oh, yeah, I was like in my pajamas on my couch writing your report. So there's certainly a level of needing to talk to a client about like, what you see on this super bill likely doesn't reflect what we did.
Mhm.
In fact, the amount of hours that I spent writing your report is a lot more than what's reflected on this super bill.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, your insurance is just not going to pay that out. And so I'm trying to make it likely for you. So, right, there's a lot of like kind of helping clients understand that this business. And I think, for me with my self-pay clients, they love it. I mean, they're like, great, whatever game we have to play to try and get reimbursed, like, it doesn't matter what I say to them. I could be like, yeah, I'm making up all this stuff and it's super unethical. And they'd be like, perfect, whatever I need to do to get
Yeah.
a chance of getting money back. And of course, it's not unethical, but I think at the end of the day, it's pretty uncommon for a client to say, no, I'd like my super bill to reflect what actually happened. No one cares. They just want to know, like, is this maybe going to get reimbursed? And you're like, maybe it's got the highest chance how I did it here.
Right. Right. Well, my question about simple practices, I just don't understand why they can't just input your signature that they have on file on your super bill. You have to actually like download it and then put your signature on it. Even though when you go to like lock a progress note and things like that, or
Yeah.
put the diagnosis code in, it puts your signature
On there. Yeah.
right? It's like,
Right.
come on, people, get it together.
This is, it says simple practice, but is it really simple? It's really not. It's actually
You
like
like
complicated
Office
multi-step
Ally?
practice.
I've never heard of Office Ally, but
Office Ally, I don't think from everyone that I've spoken to, I'm like, oh, maybe it's actually not a very common platform. And maybe because whenever I call them for help, they like pick up immediately. It's just like some guy waiting for someone to call. He's waiting for me and the other 4 providers that does Jaclyn need help today? But no, I've used Office Ally since so I have my LCPC, which is licensed clinical professional counselor. So I had my master's first and provided therapy for a while. So when I was a practicum student in my counseling psychology master's program, I did a practicum at a site and we used Office Ally. And my husband will say this as well, I am a creature of habit. Till the day I die, I'll probably use Office Ally. Even if it's like, doesn't even make sense anymore for me to, I'll be like, I don't want to learn how to use simple practice. This is like those of you, maybe you do, I don't remember if you do, who use Q Interactive.
I use Q Interactive.
And I'm like, guys, that's like testing of the future. This is like the Jetsons. Like, I can't do that. I need to like have my Wyatt booklet that's like 40 pages long. And I need to like flip through it and be confused by everything and have the booklet and have my 3 booklets out of my lap. It's just, I can't. So
You say that until you try it. And then you'll be like, why didn't I do this so long?
Maybe, but then you all who use Q Interactive post all the time, like my iPads aren't syncing or the internet's out. And then I'm like, guess what? My response booklets are always here, baby. I can do this by candlelight.
Sometimes, like, we had an almost emergency the other day. We had one of my clinicians, it was a Saturday, and she texted me like, Jana, the iPads are not working. Q Interactive is down. And I look at the site. I'm like at a cheer competition for my niece. And I like open on my phone at the site. I'm like, oh my God. And it's like, scheduled service, at such and such. And just miraculously, it was like the end of that moment right then, as like she's got this kid in her office and it like came back on.
See, like,
because we wouldn't have been able, she would have had to send the kid home.
There's no possible way. So I'm not doing it. I'm not starting simple practice. Office Ally and I've like backed myself into a corner. Like, I work around what Office Ally can't do. And I'm like, I'll just figure it out on my own. It's fine. I don't want anyone else's help. I don't need any tech help. I'll just do it. I'll just do everything in a Word document and have AI scrape it later. It's fine.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and talking about this. And I think like, even after meeting with you and feeling like real confident, right? So we're confident now. I don't know, I haven't had feedback yet, but at least we have a plan. And I feel like
Yes.
I've consulted with a professional who has gone through it, who knows it.
Right.
And so I feel good about it. And
Yeah.
then people are posting more stuff, and other people are like, oh, I do this and this, and I do this and this, and I do this and this. And I'm like, mm,
Oh, yeah.
okay, I'm just gonna stick with what I'm doing because, like I don't Facebook guidance is good for like food for thought, but I really put a lot of value in let's talk about my situation for real and talk to somebody who has gone through it, who
Yes.
has more knowledge and is gonna look at your situation and help you out with it.
Yes, and I appreciate that because that's exactly what I do. And we know, like, when I spoke with you or any clinician, I'm literally quoting the stupid PDFs, like these hidden ones, right? Like, I'm not like, I'm pretty sure that I think I heard somewhere that you shouldn't use a base codes more than once. I'm like, it's literally, it says it here, so we
Yeah.
know for sure that this is like the truth, like,
Mhm.
truth with a capital T. But I'm there with you because I think you and I are both part of the same testing group on Facebook.
Mhm.
And often I do see posts about codes, billing, and sometimes I comment and sometimes I don't because I don't want to engage in the chaos that ensues.
Right.
Because usually there's numerous messages back, or there's like well, I've always done it this way and it's been fine for me. And like, what am I going to say? Like, well, hope you don't get audited. It's kind of like,
Right.
I'm not going to get involved. But yes, I think it's always a good reminder that like it is good to talk with someone who has actual data to support this is how you do it. And I mean, for me, I post in that group probably once a week asking for advice and often some are very helpful, but keep in mind, right? Sometimes the responses are like not helpful at all and actually make you feel really bad.
Yeah.
Like, you're asking for recommendations for I don't know, a social emotional learning group. And then someone's like, but did you test for OCD? And you're like, I wasn't even asking about that. It literally it wasn't at all, right? This happens all. And so it's kind of like,
Uh-huh.
we just need to, sometimes Facebook is really not a great place to be getting our advice. We have to couch it in like, people are just also like saying shit and
Yeah.
part of my language on your
That's
podcast.
fine. You can say it.
Great. I love
We're
it.
all professionals here.
It's fine. We've heard it before. So yes, I think that if your listeners if they're hearing this and they're like, little antennas are going up of like, oh, I thought I knew what I was doing, but like maybe actually not. Um, it is good to consult with someone who actually knows what they're doing. And it could be me, and I would love that, but it doesn't have to be me, but it should be someone that does know what they're talking about and has the actual data to show like, yes, this is what you should be doing. And here's the quotes from Blue Cross or from APA as well, so that you feel good about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I 100% agree. And I think it's it- spending a little bit of money to for peace of mind
Yeah.
and like legit consultation directed at you for whatever it is, whether it's marketing or business law or, I mean, someone just asked in my Facebook group today, if I'm going to start a corporation, what should I do? I mean, the answer really is consult with a business attorney,
None
right?
of us actually know. Yeah.
Don't use LegalZoom,
Mhm.
like
Right.
consult with someone, right? Set yourself up for success in every way. This is a business. This is your baby. You do not want to be caught in a compromised position in any way if you can not, right? Like,
Absolutely. And I think too, of course, we're like, well, we want to cover ourselves. And thinking about it from this other cool business perspective, we think, okay, so let's say I do want to talk to Jaclyn and consult with her. To just be so transparent, my rate is $300 per session. And most clinicians meet with me for 1 to 3 times. So we'll cap it at, it's not going to ever cost you more than 900. And you can always just do one session. I don't care. And maybe for our self-pay folks, they're like, well, I'm not necessarily making any more money by consulting with you, Jaclyn. But what does happen and what I have been told happens is that you have clients who are regularly getting reimbursed now. And that goes a long way, right? For a family to tell another family, I met with Dr. So-and-so, her testing was wonderful. and my insurance also reimbursed me some.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's like, oh, that's the extra piece that's really helpful.
Right.
I'd
Right.
rather get some money back. If you both have the same expertise, but Dr. A also you got to recoup some of that money, why would we go to Dr. B?
Right. Right.
So being able to make sure your super bills are legit and that they are as likely as possible to be reimbursed, I think it's a good investment too in your
I do
business.
too. Well, Jaclyn, where can people find you? I'm going to post the Par Talk in the show notes so that they can find that. And I'll also post it on my website, in my Facebook group so
Mhm.
that people can find it there too. But yeah, tell us how they find you.
The easiest way is to shoot me an email directly. And I've already said that I do all of our billing, scheduling. I am the admin team. So when you email the email address I'm about to say, it will be me who replies. So our email is just testing@prosperpsych.com. So really straightforward. And then of course, if anyone wants to check out my website too, it's just prosperpsych.com. And those are the easiest ways to get in touch with me.
Perfect. And I will link those as well.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
This
Well, it
was
was
so
so
great to
great.
talk to you.
Yeah, so great to talk to you too. I love what you're doing, and I am hopeful that, this will be really helpful for the audience. And you are doing another part talk. You're going to do a part 2
Yeah.
to answer the 6 bazillion questions you got in the chat.
It's literally going to be a talk that just compiles the most common questions, and I'm just going to go through them. So it's not necessarily new. I mean, I'm sure it'll be a lot of new information, but maybe also just kind of like talking people off a cliff about things. And so there's no link for it yet because I just we confirmed it 100% yesterday. But it's going to be on April 11th
Okay.
at 11 a.m. Central Time.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. So
Cool.
once that's out there, I can't imagine that it'll definitely be out the link by February, like the first week of February, and then people can go to PAR website and I'll post it on some of our testing group pages too.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
You are very welcome.
That is it for today's episode of the Empower LEP podcast. I hope that you found this conversation insightful and inspiring as you navigate your journey in private practice. If you enjoyed the episode, I'd love for you to subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us reach more LEPs and school psychologists who are looking to build their own path in private practice. For more resources and community, you can connect with me at empowerlep.com, on Instagram at Empower LEP, on Facebook in the Empower LEP Facebook group, or by email at jana@empowerlep.com. And just a quick reminder, the information shared on this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be considered legal, business, or clinical advice. Be sure to consult with the appropriate professionals for guidance on your specific situation. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, you have the skills, you have the knowledge, and you have the power to create a private practice that truly makes an impact.